Okay, fine, whatever. Hello, welcome to the first debate of term. Welcome to the first emergency debate. Welcome to Cambridge for those of you freshers. For those of you who are expecting us to go straight into the main debate about Oxbridge, I'm afraid you have to sit through, well, not afraid, you have to sit through 4 of our best student debaters debating first. This is where we give our student debaters a chance to show you what they're doing, how good they are, and to give you guys a chance to get involved. Sometimes we debate critical and important motions that have surfaced recently, hence the term emergency debate. Tonight we'll be discussing something no less important, but perhaps slightly less current, as we have 4 of our student debaters debating "This House Regrets the Rise of Taylor Swift." If you're impressed, which I'm sure you will be, by what our 4 debaters have to offer today, I can't encourage you enough to go along to some of the debating workshops. James, who is our debating officer, organises these, which run on Wednesdays at 7, or if you'd like to go to public speaking workshops, we run women's public speaking workshops, which are on Fridays at 8. So if you're impressed, if you think that you'd like to start debating, if you've done a bit before, go along to those. But without further ado, I would like to welcome our 4 speakers, and first of all, welcome Ruby. Ruby is a third-year politics student at Sydney and was formerly Access Officer here at the Union. She, unlike our following speakers, has nothing self-deprecating to say about herself. Ruby, you have the floor.
So my job tonight is, like all good feminists, to make you hate things that you love and to ruin the simple pleasures of life, like going out. So I'm going to explain to you why you should be deeply regretful of the rise of Taylor Swift. I'm going to explain to you why you should wish that she had never exploded the way that she did onto the music scene, and why specifically we should regret her faux feminist awakening and all the ways that has helped all the women in the world, specifically Taylor Swift. So, first let's have a little chat about Taylor Swift pre-feminism. I know it seems like a long time ago, but this was only last year, right? This was the album that she released before 1989, when she was happy to write lyrics like, "She's an actress better known for what she does on the mattress. She wears high heels, I wear sneakers. She wears short skirts, I wear t-shirts. And of course, I'm not that kind of girl," right? Lyrics designed to make clear the superiority of Taylor Swift over some unnamed slut-shamed other in her pursuit of the man in the song, right? But this is only ordinarily regrettable. This is only standard beautiful white woman pop star is imperfect in the mass media, right? But then what happened was that Taylor Swift had one coffee with Lena Dunham, and the whole of the history of feminism was altered forever. So the rest of my speech is broken down into what I've called girl power squad feminism, white feminism, and then lastly, self-serving Taylorism. So firstly, girl power squad feminism. What is this? Well, basically, this is when Taylor Swift parades out large numbers of supposedly successful but noticeably very beautiful women to stand behind her while she talks about solidarity and girl power, which means, incidentally, buying tickets to Taylor Swift tours, right? Firstly, this is just not good enough, right? That's not what feminism is. It's not enough just to be successful and claim that you should be behind her because she's a woman. But secondly, it's this really strange version of feminism where she declares that she's supporting other women by letting them stand behind her on her stage while she makes a fortune. When she drags out the women's soccer team and gets them to all stand behind her on the stage at the whatever the equivalent of the Wembley Arena is in New York. No one is helped but Taylor Swift. This is just not interesting feminism. It's not hugely harmful. But then we come to white feminism. And because when your feminism is that simple, some women necessarily get left behind. Some women are necessarily not helped by a brand of squad girls, white girl feminism. So let's see, for example, her exchange with Nicki Minaj, labelled a spat or a cat fight or something else gendered and boring in the media. So what happens is Nicki Minaj tweets saying that women of colour are structurally disadvantaged in the music video. Taylor, poor Taylor, feels victimised and plays the Solidarity Women card, which is what feminism is, remember. She says, "All I've ever done is love and support you," and then says, "If I ever win something, you can come and stand behind me like you could at one of my concerts," right? This is a kind of strange feminism that just revolves around Taylor, one, not getting it, not getting that like the patriarchy affects women of color differently, that it affects queer women differently, that it affects disabled women differently, that your access to a version of empowerment that is built around looking like Taylor Swift is only available to you if you are a woman who looks like Taylor Swift. But two, this is an example of her like getting in the way of other women trying to explain some real problems in the world in order to advance her own personal, likable girl next door brand. And this is the thing with Taylor Swift's feminism. It is so transparently self-serving. It's like so completely designed to enable her to use the language of an emerging social movement, popular feminism, for her own PR and financial gains. It's a way for her to deflect criticism and protect her girl next door likability. So if another artist criticizes her for getting undue attention because she is a privileged white woman writing inoffensive pop songs, as opposed to a woman of color celebrating black female bodies and empowerment in the music industry, she gets to say that like this is a breakdown of feminist solidarity, right? Because of course to be a feminist is to love and support Taylor Swift. It enables her to defend herself against the less powerful, right? In the same way that she like uses her enormously powerful team of legal experts to sue people who make Shake It Off branded mugs and sell them on Etsy for $6. Taylor Swift is using her power against those less powerful than her, which include like Etsy vendors, Nicki Minaj, and like all other women who aren't Taylor Swift. So we've proved she's not a perfect feminist, but does that make her by herself especially regrettable? Well, I think it does, for several reasons. Because firstly, she hijacks the emergent movement of popular feminism, something that is like building a groundswell of support amongst young women who are starting for the first time to call themselves feminists, and makes it about something just too simple and too easy, and that crucially does absolutely no good to anyone but a tiny number of women, right? But secondly, it's just a huge amount of cultural power misspent. It's a huge number of interviews and a huge amount of airtime that she could be spending like actually helping someone, raising money for women's charities, or like doing something else. But lastly, like it just obscures the work it takes to live a properly feminist life by making it too easy, by making it all like squad girl goals and selfies. And for me, that's not good enough. Propose.
Speaking in the middle 3 minutes of their speech, can stand up and say, on that point of information, can I pull you up on that, oi, anything you want to attract their attention, and they will then potentially take you, or they may ask you to sit back down if they're in full flow. After Kate's next speech, we'll also have an opportunity to make longer points. I realize many of you are freshers. You're more than welcome to make points. Please do get involved. Don't be scared. There's only like 600 people watching. Many more on television. We record these, but really don't let that put you off speaking. It's not that scary. And hey, you'll look back at it when you graduate and be like, did I say that? Wow, I've learnt so much. Sorry, I was meant to be encouraging. Well, let's move on to Kate's second speech. Kate is a second-year English student at Magdalen. In addition to having an outstanding competitive debating CV, she also owns every single Taylor Swift song released since her self-titled album in 2009. She once saw her live and cried. Kate, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, so at the end of her speech, Ruby tells you that Taylor Swift is bad for the young women who are just starting to call themselves feminists. Well, first of all, I'd like to ask Ruby where these women are coming from. And usually it's because people are starting to talk about feminism in the media. It's because people are starting to see people they look up to, they're starting to see the kind of celebrities that they idolize, starting these discussions, and they start to look into feminism, right? Like, I disagree when Ruby tells you that having a feminist celebrity is pointing people in the wrong direction. So in my speech, I'm going to be talking about how the nature of the media and the nature of the music industry means that someone had to rise to fame in the way Taylor did. Like, there is demand for this kind of music. And how on our side of the house, we think it's better that Taylor Swift is the person who rose to that place of fame than someone else who might be using something else as a marketing gimmick. Because ladies and gentlemen, on our side of the house, we believe, like, whether or not Taylor Swift is perfect, at least she's peddling an ideology that we can get behind, right? And also, like in response to Ruby, haters gonna hate. So let's talk a little bit like in response to what we heard from Ruby. So first of all, we get this idea that like girl power squad feminism isn't good. But like at the end of the day, what we've seen in Taylor Swift's career is that she's turned from a feminism that turns women against each other. I don't need to repeat the lyrics that Ruby quoted to you all, but like feminism like that. Now to like change her image. And media outlets have also called her out on changing this image, which means there's opening a dialogue, encouraging young women who have followed Taylor Swift's career from the beginning to change their attitudes. But also like her huge amounts of fame have begun after she's become better, right? So most of her newer fans aren't aware of the kind of bad lyrics in the past, right? Like 1989 was her massive, massive album, right? Like she dipped in sales in the Speak Now album, which I know because I follow her career religiously. And those were that was the time that doesn't sell, right? So like even if this is a product, even if it's a commodity, it's a good product and I'm buying it because I would like to love other women, right? I would like to see a woman who is making a career for herself and who is marketing herself to the public in a way that is effective, right? Like I'd say that isn't bad. Furthermore, like I'm not going to defend every action Taylor Swift has ever committed. It's not ideal to me that her girl squad are all beautiful, skinny, most of them are models. That's not perfect. But at least that girl squad exists, right? At least there's some kind of rhetoric of loving other women in your career. There's some kind of rhetoric of supporting their success rather than necessarily cutting them down. Which brings me on to this idea of like the unfortunate Twitter spat with Nicki Minaj. So like obviously what happened there is Taylor Swift missed the memo and her brand of feminism wasn't right. And then the media got a hold of that, and as the media is wont to do, spun that into a girl fight because that sells more albums than actually talking about what white feminism is. What we saw in that dispute is like Taylor Swift had a willingness to learn, which she has shown throughout her career. Yes?
When you say media spun that rather than actually discussing like what white feminism is taking out black women's rights to question structural discrimination not a problem with white feminism? How is this media sin?
That is the problem with white feminism. What I'm saying is the articles in the media were phrased to make it like Nicki Minaj and Taylor have beef against each other rather than turning it into the discussion that should have been being had, which is like Nicki Minaj calls out structural privilege and this is a problem. So anyway, like given that it is the nature of the music industry that like someone has to be an incredibly famous musician because we have demand for celebrity brands, say that like there are other people with similar, other similar people such as Miley Cyrus, there we go. Such as Miley Cyrus, who have made similar transgressions but refused to apologize for them and refused to learn from them. What we see here is like at least there is someone who wants to learn and engage in that discussion. And then lastly, on this idea, so then let's get on to what Taylor Swift's brand of feminism actually is and why it's okay for someone's feminism not to be perfect but to be improving. So Ruby tells us that Taylor Swift isn't living the properly feminist life, so we have to condemn her. First of all, I'm not entirely clear what the proper feminist life is. Like, it would be great if feminism had, like, here are 5 steps to be a perfect feminist even. Everyone agrees this is the feminist life. Everyone agrees on these things. But the thing is all women are different, and there is no perfect feminist life. And people need to find their way into that feminist life on their own. Like, I would like it to be an intersectional one. I would like it to be one where, like, women have freedom of choice and all of these other things. But that is a discussion that is ongoing, and that is a discussion that people are only engaging in if we actually have people who are out there, have celebrities who are at least throwing this word around, right? Because even if they're not doing the right things, you can have a quick Google of that word, and you can start looking into what branches of feminism interest you, right? You can start from seeing a Taylor Swift interview when she says, "I'm a feminist now," and end up several months later reading Simone de Beauvoir, right? Like, that is a path that some people go down, and that is how that might work. And for other people, maybe they're only engaging on a surface level with that celebrity image, but at the very least, they're starting to think about these issues. So ladies and gentlemen, we're not defending or claiming that Taylor Swift is perfect, but we are saying that her rise and the rise of her personally is better than the rise of someone else in that position. And like, we're buying what she's selling. Ladies and gentlemen, we beg you to oppose.
Thank you very much, Kate. Now we get to the point in the debate where I realize I might have shot myself in the foot and put you all off speaking. Unfortunately, it's sort of something we do, so if someone would like to put their hand up and speak in proposition of the motion, that would be appreciated, because otherwise it gets awkward at this point. Anyone? There's 600 of you. Anyone at all? Nobody regrets Taylor Swift. No one has heard Shake It Off too many times. Nobody's more of a Nicki girl. Anyone want to speak in proposition? Okay, moving on to points in opposition. Anyone like to speak in opposition? Yeah. Could I ask you to say your name and college beforehand so we can all get to know you?
Hi, Rory Cumming, Trinity College. Sorry, you reminded me of a thing. I regret the rise of Taylor Swift because at a point in, I think, Lent term last year, I was forced to take part in a Taylor Swift tribute act, and I'd like to apologise to everyone for that, and I regret that it happened, and I regret the rise of Taylor Swift.
Well done, a brave admission to start off the new academic year. So, following on from that, would anyone like to oppose the motion? I will look around a bit more carefully. If there's anyone up there, can someone point and shout? Guys, we're going to run over if we have to sit here for this long. Yep, gentleman's friend next door. Can we have your name and college again?
John Howell, Trinity College. I was there for the incident Rory's referring to. It was hilarious. I don't regret the rise of Taylor Swift.
Anyone not from Trinity? So at this point, we have someone speak in abstention of the motion. For those of you who are new or just wondering what the hell I'm chatting about, if you'd like to speak in abstention of the motion, that is where you disagree with both sides, you would like something clarifying, you think my motion is completely stupid, you've sort of nodded off and you've not caught up. So we have someone speaking in abstention. Yes, down here.
Matthew Coop from Goldman Keys. I can't help but feel like a bit of a cynic here. How far do these celebrities actually believe in the ideologies they're supposedly peddling? Maybe we're overanalyzing this a little bit.
See, when everyone claps, it sounds good. Right, we're going to go for one more round. Give new people a chance to speak, if they would so wish. So do we have one more point in proposition of the motion now you've seen other people have a go? Nope. Bad luck, Ruby. Anyone in opposition? Oh, yes, Keen, over here.
Hello, my name is Maher, and I'm from Darwin College. The thing that I don't understand is the definition of feminism that you are trying to explain, and your definition of feminism, and how is that different from each other? So that's my problem here. So if I'm able to understand better how you define feminism and how you define feminism, I'll be able to understand better your point of view. So I would appreciate maybe if you explain that to the audience. Thank you.
And finally, do we have a last point in abstention of the motion? You agree with neither side? Nope. Okay, let's move on. We'll move on to the second half of... Oh, no, sorry. Go for it. Matteo, run a mic up. Named and shamed.
Hi, Xavier Bissett, Trinity College. So, I mean, feminism is very important, but it's not the only thing that counts when it comes to being a regrettable character. So you've got, for example, the fact that Taylor has been very involved in the business world. She had this fight with Spotify in trying to set up her own company, or some kind of a competitor. So I'd like to hear more discussion of how she's inspiring women as a business leader and a business leader on her own terms.
Thanks very much, Xavier. Okay, moving on to Shrishti. Shrishti is a third-year PhD student in English at Newnham. She's a very experienced competitive debater, and she also asks that anyone she supervises please vote for the proposition tonight. Shrishti.
All right. I found out relatively recently that I was doing this debate, by which I mean about an hour back. All right. I have two broad points today. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about how even when Taylor Swift has managed to take on this incredible media backlash against her and spin it into something positive and empowering, such as Blank Space, that is still a problematic exploration of certain very important social issues. And secondly, slightly unsurprisingly, I'm going to talk to you in a lot more detail about the very problematic attitudes towards race and sort of racial discrimination within the industry. But first, I've got several points of rebuttal. So, and this is the very important floor speech we get, which says, what is the difference between your feminism and your feminism, right? So what Kate tells us is essentially, look, there are young girls, they listen to Taylor Swift's music, and for the first time ever, they hear the word feminist, because literally this word has never been in currency before or since. And then a few months later, they're reading Simone de Beauvoir. Now, this is a very problematic claim to make, right? Because first of all, the idea that women should be, broadly equal to men seems to have been in currency for a really long time, wasn't particularly invented by Taylor Swift, right? But even if it is true that the reason that Taylor Swift is so popular means that more women are attracted to her brand of feminism, the feminism she sells, the feminism that is an ideological commodity that you're willing to purchase, all Kate's words, not mine. Even if it is true, their entire case is contingent on the idea that Taylor has a massive fan following, therefore what she says goes. Therefore, young women feel inspired to act like her. Now, Kate says this is a good thing because what Taylor says is, look, women should support each other. We don't disagree with that, right? I mean, all of Ruby's speech was that is what she claims to do when she says women should support each other, except when it's a black woman, right? Except when it's a woman whose sexual morals don't agree with yours, right? We think that's problematic. When you're explicitly peddling yourself as this icon of an ideological movement, someone who has a massive reach and power, and then peddle a very problematic brand of feminism, that's a problem, right? Okay. Then they say, look, what is it? Oh, yeah. We think that this is important because the idea of the girl squad existing is good because it's a show, it's a very public display of female solidarity. I mean, I don't know a lot about music, but I'm presuming all-female bands existed way before Taylor Swift's Girl Squad did, right? So it's not as though the kind of things that they're claiming stem exclusively from Taylor Swift actually have anything to do with Taylor Swift. These are ideas that would have existed even without the rise of Taylor Swift, right? Then Kate tells us, look, there is no perfect feminist. We're all learning how to be feminists. Now that's true, except by your own admission, Taylor Swift is someone who's teaching women how to feminism. And then her how to feminism then also involves things like telling black women that they should not call out structural discrimination within the music industry, right? We agree that everyone has flaws. And in fact, I mean, we don't even think that the burden on proposition in this debate is to say Taylor is an absolutely appalling human being. It is simply to say that she's more regrettable than not, right? Okay. So let's look at two things today. First of all, to be very clear, this debate is not about the media backlash against her and sort of people slut-shaming her and calling her out for having a string of boyfriends or whatever, right? We don't have to support that. But what happens when Taylor does decide to take charge of the narrative, when she satirizes it, such as in Blank Space? Now, first of all, she comes from a position of power. So her position of power, her empowered femininity, from which she's able to satirize this, comes from having incredibly good looks, comes from being incredibly rich, right? And that itself is problematic. But then again, the main issue with the way she presents this challenge is when she produces a video that stigmatizes intimate partner violence, that stigmatizes, that sort of trivializes female on male intimate partner violence, right? Now, this wouldn't have been a problem if female on male intimate partner violence or domestic violence had not been a real issue. But it is. It is a tremendously stigmatized issue. Taylor chooses to trivialize this from a position of power in order to get back at media challenging her. We think that is absolutely atrocious. But let's have a brief chat about race, right? Okay, so we think that it is great that Taylor Swift thinks that you should, women should support each other and care for each other and, the girl squad should exist. We think this is an absolutely laudable goal, except when that is what your brand marketing is. But then what you choose to do is the one time that Nicki Minaj stands up and says, look, this industry does not recognize my talent, to then step into that place and say, what about me? I mean, I'm the real victim here, guys. Like, Can you not see how heavily discriminated I've been? You know, this is so problematic for a range of reasons, right? First of all, she's occupying the singular space of protest that powerful black women have. Then she chooses to marginalize and oppress those voices. Remember, the Nicki Minaj standing up and saying there is a problem with like racial discrimination in the industry is a huge thing, right? Because this is not a problem that has been solved. This isn't, as Kate points out, media spin. This is Taylor Swift saying, you're upsetting my feelings. You're upsetting my feelings because I've always supported you. But when this is a complete mockery of the idea of what black people go through, what art is considered good art, the rise of Taylor Swift and her use of this particular, this form of rise to consolidate very problematic notions have to stand in favor of proposition, right? Okay. But then again, we also have, what is it? Shake It Off, I believe. I have actually watched that video. It is a very, very catchy tune, right? I mean, I agree. It sounds great. Till you begin to consider the kind of images that are being used in these videos. So Taylor Swift's powerful, attractive, white, thin, desirable girl squad is one thing. But the black women in that video, when they're being objectified and they're being heavily sexualized, in the context of an industry that only sees black women as accessories, right? In the context of a country where there is, you know, the rate of violence against women of color is absolutely atrocious, is, you know, frankly irresponsible, right? But more importantly, when Taylor Swift has sort of wears braids, for instance, right? Or when she wears Converse, for instance, why is this a problem? Like, this isn't just a simple case of cultural appropriation. It's the fact that she decides that certain things, you know, that she solidifies the idea that certain black women features look attractive on white women bodies. But when black women stand up and say, this industry is disregarding our art, she has to step in and say, but what about me? Poor Taylor. But finally, let's look at the idea of how Taylor Swift promotes in her latest video, which I believe is called A Wildest Dream. Okay, so if you've seen the video, effectively what it does is presents this colonial fantasia, right? So it is set in this undemarcated African, sort of colonial African land where there's literally no black person. Why is this a problem? Because, well, first of all, because that's empirically false, right? But more importantly, because she chooses to trivialize and romanticize, you know, she can afford to trivialize and romanticize the idea of this beautiful, wistful woman, white woman with, like, you know, stellar red lipstick or whatever, in the context of tremendous brutality and historical oppression, right? Like, this is a context where you're talking about individuals experiencing genocide and exploitation, and here is Taylor Swift romanticizing this ideal and saying, oh, you know, whatever has that, you know, whatever. I mean, also the level of art, right? Like, the lyrics are appalling, right? So there, I mean, so the thing is this, right? So we agree with them when they say that the nature of media is such that there will be a rise, but that's not the debate. To be very clear, this debate is about the rise of Taylor Swift. We say that all the good things you say that come out of the rise of Taylor Swift are also responsible for the tremendously, you know, like the terrible negative messaging that she's sending out. For all of these reasons, very proud to propose.
Thank you very much, Shrishti. And moving on to close the debate, we have James. James, as I mentioned earlier, is one of our 2 debating officers for 2015, which means in charge of organising the Wednesday evening workshops, which I do genuinely encourage. He wrote this more sarcastically, but you should definitely come to. He also did a fair bit of competitive debating last year, in his own words, mostly dragging down people who were better than him. Sorry, Kate. James, the floor is yours.
So everyone, as you can probably tell, at the Cambridge Uni Society, we care an awful lot about diversity. So after having 3 women debate about Taylor Swift, we just wanted to make sure there was a man in the debate to, you know, clarify everything in case anything wasn't clear before that. That's self-aware. That's self-aware. That's self-aware because this is like the third time I've been put in this debate because no one else wants to do it at the last minute, and it always goes really well for me, and that's why they're not recording this, because, you know, careers and stuff like that. So I want to clarify a few things in this speech. I want to, you know, perhaps step back a bit and talk about not just this debate, but how debates in the chamber often work, and what you should do when perhaps you're not quite sure which things you should prioritize or which arguments you find most persuasive. Because sometimes people give, you know, interesting speeches and different arguments, but you're not sure how they should relate to each other. And that's why I'm going to start by looking at a very simple question, which is precisely what it means when we should regret something. Because bear in mind that what we told you at Kate very clearly was that we didn't have to support everything that Taylor Swift did, because that would be a mad world. And we thought that debates about regret had to be slightly more subtle than that. It had to say, look, we exist in a certain context, and that context isn't what Srishti tried to pretend that we'd said, which was that people don't know what feminism is, but it's the context where young girls don't believe that they can be feminist. It's where that label has certain connotations for them they don't think they could own. We thought that was the context that we wanted this debate to have to occur in. And it was in that context, the context where someone was going to take that place and someone was perhaps going to market an imperfect kind of feminism, that we wanted to see whether or not Taylor Swift was better than the alternative, which was probably just going to be Miley Cyrus anyway. And that's why we thought ultimately it wasn't a good idea to regret her rise. But secondly, we wanted to clarify exactly... no, thank you. No, that's not going to happen. We wanted to clarify a few other things as well. No. Okay. No. Because now to move briefly back onto what Kate told you, because our case was a pragmatic one, and we said, look, if there's some kind of trade-off between quality and quantity, insofar as we can have some feminism that's iterating towards a more intersectional feminism, not that we thought there was one perfect feminism, because we thought feminism was about having debate and discussion, and having a set of beliefs about the equality of women, but recognizing that was a practice, and there was going to be disagreement. But insofar as we might not have the perfect feminism, we thought it was better if that was perhaps something that would get out marginally and persuade more people who hadn't had as much access to feminism in the first place. Because, like, it's all very well and good, no thank you, to have debates in this wonderful, glorious chamber out of the 18th century or something in the Cambridge bubble and talk about points about intersectional feminism, but the reality is most people in the real world weren't going to be able to find those particularly accessible or weren't going to be actually affected a huge degree. No thank you. No, thank you, Ruby. I'm really fine. Weren't going to be, those weren't the kinds of things that were actually going to have much traction for those people anyway, because we think it was actually a massive win if you get some young girls saying, yes, I am a feminist, when the real issue that we're trying to overcome right now isn't making minor adjustments to the, like, obviously there are multiple issues, but one of the big barriers we have right now, which we still need to overcome at some point, is make people be willing to say, no, thank you, I am a feminist. And once we've done that, we think you can then have more nuanced debates. Obviously they can occur at the same time, but trade-offs have to happen. And we aren't evil for supporting one side, even though Srishti has given me some really powerful side glances right now, which might, make my head explode or some such. So, but there's one last thing we want to talk about in this speech, because I'm aware that there are other debates that have to happen, the ones you actually came for, not the one that is taking up your time right now. And what I want to talk about is good intentions, because something that we want to point out is that it doesn't actually matter, even if lots of their material stands, even if Taylor Swift is incredibly self-serving, even if she does have an amazing brand manager who's putting her Instagram feed up with all of these beautiful people, all these beautiful photos, and it's all incredibly cynical and self-serving. Because it is true that some of the things Taylor does help other artists as well. So if you want to talk about capitalism and the media industry more generally, we think it matters, for example, that Taylor Swift was able to lobby Spotify in such a way that meant people had more purchasing power, not just the biggest brand, not just the biggest singers, but people who are smaller artists who are going to be screwed over by that deal, which she could therefore change. But at the end of the day, the point is that we've spent 25 minutes talking about a fairly esoteric point in the context of, somewhat, Srishti, you've got to admit, these arguments aren't going to be the end of the world either way or the other. They are somewhat marginal, they go in either direction. We weren't the team that was going to support everything, or we weren't the team that was going to say Taylor Swift was perfect. We were just the team that thought that on the margins, the world in which she existed was one that we didn't regret, and that's why we oppose.
Thank you very much, James, and indeed, thank you to all of our speakers. We're now going to get to a point that I sense is going to lead to some more awkwardness in the room. For those of you who came last year, you'll remember what's about to come. For those of you who are new, during the emergency debate, we vote by acclamation. What this means is shouting. So in a couple of seconds, I'm going to ask you to shout in turn for which side you would like to win, going first proposition, then opposition, and then abstention. So now be brave, there's a big room of you, someone else will shout. If you want the proposition to win, so that's if you agree with Ruby and Shrishti, on the count of 3, will you shout I? 1, 2, 3. I! Good. Do you want a second go at that, in case they were nervous the first time? Yeah, okay. Proposition feel they're being disadvantaged. Now you know that other people are going to shout. On the count of 3, shout I if you agree. 1, 2, 3. I! And for the opposition, on the count of 3, will you shout nay? Nay? No, no, whatever. 1, 2, 3. And again, if you want to abstain, on the count of 3, I would like you to shrug as loudly as possible. 1, 2, 3. Almost. I think it was close, but I think the opposition probably have it. So congratulations to the opposition.